Hey friends, it's Carrie and welcome back to I Like Reddit channel. Today, we have a mix of stories out of some different subreddits, including Entitled Parents, Entitled People, and I Don't Work Here Lady. Let's begin. Our first story is by Honeyloo Melon. EM drives in the wrong lane and blames me when we nearly crash. So, this happened a few months ago and I was painfully angry, so my memory isn't perfect. Also, I'm writing this on my phone, so apologies if this messes with formatting. I'm no Reddit expert, but I see other people post this and I figured I should as well. Now for a bit of context. In my town, there is a little shopping district with a bunch of different stores on both sides of a small road. At the far end of the road is a rather big Walmart with a massive parking lot. As you can imagine, the road I just mentioned leads into the parking lot and becomes part of the parking lot once the road ends. It's a little difficult to explain, but not overly important to the story. Just know that me and EM were on a small sliver of the road that melted into the parking lot. There was really only two people involved, those being myself and EM. Her son was also in her SUV, but he didn't say a word the entire time. So, after work one day, I had to make a quick trip to Walmart to get a few things that I hadn't realized I was running low on. Now bear in mind, this was after working 10 hours, so my patience levels were pretty low. My part of Canada is pretty well known for having some really crappy drivers. I like to think of myself as one of the pretty decent drivers, so it could be frustrating at times to say the least. Anyway, I was just about to enter the small road / parking lot section, and off in the distance I could see a big burgundy SUV coming my way, driving head on towards me in my own lane. We were both driving pretty slow, since it was a parking lot, so both of us had time to acknowledge the situation and work around it. However, there was very little I could do. To my right was curb blocking my way if I wanted to swerve, to my left was oncoming traffic lane, and ahead of me was EM, who was still not in her lane and driving right towards me. Obviously, I start honking my horn and eventually slow down to basically a halt as I watched this woman continue to drive in my lane. She was close enough at this point that I could see she was clearly not distracted or asleep or anything. She was looking straight ahead and her son was doing the same. We were pretty much playing chicken, except I'm moving at like 5 kilometers an hour, while she's pretty much going 20, not breakneck speeds, but enough to damage my vehicle I take a lot of pride in. It was pretty much at the last second that EM decided to violently swerve back into her own lane. At this point, I could see her flailing her arms and yelling at me, all while her son was looking terrified. I'll admit I let my frustration get the better of me here and came to a complete stop when I saw what looked like EM blaming me for a collision she almost caused. She too came to a stop a few seconds later when she saw me getting out of my vehicle to ask her what her problem was. This is what happened from there. Me, walking angrily towards the SUV. Is there a problem? You saw me there the entire time, right? EM, you nearly killed me and my boy. Me, no, you nearly killed you and your boy. I don't know where you got your license, but we tend to drive on the right side of the big yellow line here. EM, you saw me and you easily could have moved out of the way. Instead, you stayed put and put my son's life at risk. Pleasant reminder that we were moving at a snail's pace. No one's life was in danger, just the front bumpers of our vehicles. Me. So I should drive in oncoming traffic because you're too stubborn to drive in your own lane? EM. You are driving at me. I'm calling the police right now. You need to be taken off the road for the safety of our town. Me. Please call them. In fact, here's my license plate number. Not sure why I felt the need to give her that. I was angry and not thinking entirely straight. And when they get here, I'll be more than happy to show them the dash cam footage of you nearly driving into me. EM then hung up the phone, that I'm not entirely sure she was calling anyone in the first place, and sped away, screeching her tires in the process. The whole time we were having this shouting match. Her son was just avoiding any eye contact. I think he knew his mom was in the wrong despite how young he looked. I took her license plate number as she drove off just in case, but that was the last I ever saw or heard from her. As I think back on it now, I think she may have been doing it on purpose to somehow try and get some money out of me or something like that, as the parking lot laws here state that any accidents are 50-50 responsibility wise if they happen on the designated parking lot. That's the most logical explanation I can think of anyway. I hope you liked my fairly short story, not as dramatic as some others in this sub, but it was worth a share at least. Wow, what a psycho. I think this was either some sort of a scam, either that or maybe the mother was on something. I still think the OP should send in their dash cam footage to the police because this person is obviously a danger to themselves and others, and they probably shouldn't be driving. Anyway, on to the next story. Our next story is by Encentium Seraph. Entitled roommate moves out, then begs to move back in and complains when we don't give him the biggest bedroom. This is a story about my entitled roommate from about a decade ago. To put his entitlement into perspective, he was dating my other roommate at one time, and when my roommate cut his hair, he used to have silky blonde hair down to his shoulders to donate to cancer patients. My entitled roommate's response was to start crying and say, "I can't cut my hair, I couldn't do it," being upset that he didn't have the guts to chop off his hair, but was upset because someone else did something nice and he didn't want to do it, making it all about him. What did not help matters was that since I originally moved to the area from out of state, I sort of fell in with his friend group who were frankly fairly toxic, led by a woman who thought that she was in charge because she was the only one who was married. She was the type who barked orders and then started crying and telling everyone you were awful if you didn't want to follow or do what she said. Her husband was a jerk. He was also a self-proclaimed former homophobe who tolerates gays now, but would still beat their butts if they hit on him. Myself, entitled roommate, and entitled roommate's boyfriend, and other roommates are all gay. And some other chick who decided to call me by a nickname and get everyone else to call me that as well, when I said I wasn't comfortable with the nickname, got told, "Well, I had an ex with your name, and when I say it, I think of him, so you just have to deal with it." So yeah, him and all of them are fairly annoying. Eventually, after a year of being roommates, entitled roommate and his boyfriend break up, and other roommate and I decide to get places ourselves, since entitled roommate was able to get a free room in a mutual friend's house. Turns out the guy who ran our D&D group was buying an old house and offered a room to entitled roommate, who seemed happy about the fact that he could move out and be away from his ex. Meanwhile, other roommate and I find a third roommate who also ended up being a jerk, but for completely different reasons. We decided to move into a 4-bedroom apartment that was only $900 a month. This was sort of in the middle of nowhere, in one of those states that doesn't have any nightlife, if you were wondering how the apartment could be so cheap. To say it was 4 bedrooms was a little presumptuous, and it was really more like 3.5 bedrooms. The last bedroom was half the size of the other 3 rooms. Like a small child's room. It was big enough to handle a bed and some other things. It would just be cramped. Entitled roommate moved out, and the 3 of us moved in, only for entitled roommate to show up at our new apartment in tears because the room in the old house wasn't what he expected. Apparently, it was old, dirty, and not well kept. It would have required a lot of work, from what he said, and he was just in hysterics over it. Thus, he begged us to let him move back in with us, since we had a new 4-bedroom apartment. We had an extra room he could use for a couple of months until he could find something better. I wasn't super excited about him moving back in with us, and neither was his ex, but neither of us were so heartless that we would kick him out to be homeless. So we agreed to let him move in and even put him on the lease so there wouldn't be a gap in his residency. You think he'd be grateful, right? Well, like I said, the apartment was really more of a 3.5 bedroom, and the 3 of us, who already planned on being there from the start, had already moved into the 3 large bedrooms, leaving the smallest bedroom for entitled roommate. He pouts and gets indignant that he should get the smallest room, just because he was the last, how we should discuss it, and one of us should give up their room so that he could have a bigger bedroom. None of us were willing to give up our rooms, and pointing out that we were doing him a favor by letting him move in at all, and that he said he wasn't planning on staying more than a few months anyway. He argues that when he moves out in a couple of months, then we can have the bigger bedrooms back, but we all said no. So in the end, entitled roommate gets stuck with the smallest room. Oh, by the way, those few months he said he was going to stay until he found a new place, that never happened, and I ended up moving out first before he did. I ended up moving states about 8 to 9 months into the lease. Since the roommates had grown accustomed to splitting the rent 4 ways, they wanted me to try and find someone to move in to take my place. And I made a deal with entitled roommate that he could take my bigger room if he takes responsibility for finding a 4th roommate. He was from the area, and sadly, I had not made any friends while living there. He agreed and I was off the hook until about a week and a half before I was moving, and he said he couldn't find anyone and it was up to me to find someone, and that he was still taking my old room. He tried to give me an ultimatum that if I didn't find someone else, that I'd have to keep paying my part of the rent on the apartment I didn't even live in. I basically told him off and reminded him that this was his responsibility now. Either way, I was leaving and would not be paying rent anymore. I ended up moving away after that, and I never spoke to entitled roommate or any of my former roommates again, and I'm much happier with the area I ended up moving to. The area had great weather, and it finally gave me a chance to be a social butterfly for once, really bolstering my confidence. Anyway, that's my story of my entitled choosing beggar roommate. They didn't have to give him anything at all, and yet he still complained about the size of the room. They could have just said no, find another place to live, and just let him live on the streets, but they weren't heartless. Wow. I just can't believe the nerve of this guy. And then asking the OP to continue paying rent on a place that he doesn't even live. I agree with the OP, and I'm glad that he was able to get away from these toxic jerks. Anyway, on to the next story. Our next story is by The Tappy. You don't have kids, you should pay for me. I had this acquaintance I would go to yoga with often. We started going to lunch after our workout. It was fun. We would sit on an amazing balcony and relax and have our lunch while talking about everything that had gone on that week. The first week, the waiter gave me the bill, and without a second thought, I just paid it. Normally, I do the I get it this time, you get it next time thing. The only issue is that the second time the waitress handed it straight to me again. I look at my friend, who starts getting her things ready to go, and I again play it, although slightly confused and clearly bothered. The third time before the same thing happened again, I asked the waitress the reason I kept getting the full bill for her. I asked while my dining partner was away. The waitress looked uncomfortable and stated my friend each time told her I was paying. I told the waitress to please split the bill. No such arrangement had been made. My friend returned to the table and ordered another round of drinks, and I asked the waitress for my bill so that I could be checked out. She brought us both our bills, and I pulled out my debit card to pay my part. I owed $12.32, much more manageable for my budget. My friend's bill was $38.24, about average for her last two bills. My friend looked at the waitress confused. EM. Oh no, I'm not paying for that. Put it on her tab. I look at her with question. Me? Excuse me? I never agreed to that. EM. You paid the last two times. Me? I know I did. That's why I'm surprised you are not paying for me this time. That is when she said the most annoying thing. I have kids. You don't. You can afford it. Me? Excuse me? I said this clearly offended. Me? If you cannot afford it, why are you consistently ordering 3 times my bill? I glare at her. EM looked at me smugly and said, you know, I don't get to go out much. I deserve this. I was so frustrated. Me? Yeah, you deserve it. Not on my dime. Also, you go out all the time. She called me selfish and clarified that she had no card or money to pay her part. She and the server had some words. The waitress said that she needed payment from one of us or the police would be called. It was clarified by her, even if I personally tried to leave, the police would be called. The waitress was super mean to both EM and myself. I was uncomfortable and angry because this had nothing to do with me. I just sat next to this girl. I paid EM's part of the bill and left a note and 0% tip on my receipt. I stopped talking to EM. EM made a point to tell everyone in class she was so confused, didn't understand what the problem was, and found me selfish considering it was only $38. I stopped going to that studio, which, if EM is reading this, I hope you choke. The restaurant called and asked if there was anything they could do. I just told them to train their staff regarding checkout procedure. It was an odd situation for me, and I was uncomfortable, and I feel threatening the police on me for food and drink I did not order or touch was uncalled for. I will never go back. After what EM said to OP, and basically saying you have to pay every time, if I were OP, I would have paid my $12 check and basically said, I'm not paying anything else. This is on EM. EM has a $38 bill. Either that or demanded to speak to the manager, pull out a typical Karen or EM type move, because that is unacceptable. She shouldn't have to pay for somebody else's stuff just because EM thinks that she should pay for her stuff. Anyway, on to our final story. Our final story is posted by Haunted Disney. My manager texted me to come into work after I quit 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago I gave my notice. I didn't want to just quit like a lot of people do. It's terrible for the employees staying. I gave my 2 weeks notice to 2 district managers and they told me that they would tell my manager. I'm back in school and I can't stay out late closing the restaurant. Not only that, but adults and teenagers alike tell me that this is the worst place they've ever worked. No training, always running out of stock, rude customers, understaffed, the employers don't listen to you, but that's a story for another day. Anyway, I worked the past 2 weeks and was so happy to finally be done, right? Wrong. They scheduled me again, and I thought it was just a mistake. But the district managers remember, and I never told my manager, so now they say I have to work an extra 2 weeks. Is this my fault or theirs? To answer OP's question, yeah, I think it's their district manager's fault. I don't think they should have to go back in past their 2 weeks. That's all the stories I have for today. If you like my content, please like and subscribe to my channel. Please hit the bell notification to let you know when I've uploaded new content. Links to the original Reddit post will be in the description below. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.